Now, though, we're going to be looking at Eborn's greatest writs, which I thought was clever enough to read out. Andrew Eborn joins me now, barrister and broadcaster. Andrew, good evening to you.
Good evening, Patty, and how lovely to see you in the evening, having seen you in the morning over the weekend.
I know,
what a joy.
That was a shock to the system, actually getting up at 4 o'clock. I'm not used to that.
Days. It was brilliant. More platforms than Paddington. Yes, I was on with David myself the following day, and I was doing Peter's show just beforehand. But it was a wonderful thing to see you. I think you were going to go home and watch a movie and cuddle up with your dog, weren't you?
It's exactly what I did. It's exactly what I did all day. Right, let's have a look and see what you've got for me this evening. Music photographer Alec Byrne is suing Getty Images for copyright infringement. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yes, and it's a real fundamental right. Everybody who is watching and listening around the world, your zillions of audiences, are all copyright owners. And what that is, it gives you a bundle of rights to stop people reproducing your work without your consent. And what's happened, this particular photographer, Alec Byrne, is a very famous one. He is suing Getty Images, who have used some of his very famous photos of bands such as ABBA and Fleetwood Mac and the Bee Gees, basically without his consent. And these photos were taken sometime between 1969 and 1973, and he discovered it because he started seeing them in various publications. Now, the reason this is important is a number of things, is that everybody, as I say, is a copyright owner. And when you take a photograph, basically you as the photographer will own the copyright in that photo. Now, the really interesting thing, Petri, is if you give your phone, as we did over the weekend, to somebody else to take a picture of us, the person, arguably, who took that photo could own the copyright in that photo and therefore could stop you using it.
On your own phone?
Yes, isn't that extraordinary? Because the rules, basically, has never been tested. This could be a first for the Petri show, the legal news, everyone's greatest writs. Is that basically if somebody else is taking the photograph, there's an argument that could be put that they could get the copyright in it. Now, the reason it's important, and copyright basically lasts for 70 years after the photographer's death, and basically the exception to it is if it's created in the course of employment or they've signed an agreement to the contrary. So it's a really important bundle of rights. It's things that you write and so on and so forth. In this day and age when AI is taking everything over and it's scraping the internet for all of these images, including social media, knowing what your rights are really, really important. So I work with lots of people, as you know, around the world, basically helping them protect their rights, but also making sure that they are, like any other property right, they are the rightful owner of those rights. And therefore, if somebody does use it, that they should get proper recompense.
Yeah, it's an interesting one as a presenter or a voiceover. I once did a voiceover for a company that sells cars, and they paid me, and I signed a document when they paid me, but it was supposed to be an internal use of my voice. And it was used externally, and there was nothing I could do about it. So they paid me pennies, which they would have had to have paid me a heck of a lot more to use my voice in other territories and externally. But I couldn't.
I would say, Petra, there is something you can do, and I would have fought that case for you. But as the owner,
I couldn't afford you. I couldn't afford you.
I would do it for you for nothing, Petra. It's always a
now, everybody heard that, right? That's a verbal contract right there.
It's so important.
It was a long time ago. Yeah, I know it is, but people take advantage. You know, I did something again the other day as a sort of friend of a friend thing. And he sent me this thing for me to sign, saying he could use my voice in perpetuity, forever. What's that word?
Perpetuity.
Perpetuity. Thank you. And on any platform and anything he wanted. And I said, "Are you actually mad? I am not signing that." So no. So people do try to take advantage.
Yeah, and especially in this day and age, because what's happening now as AI, it can mimic your voice, and what you don't want to find is that the Petri show is done by a bot. Because this particular person has managed to get your voice and you've given them
as long as I get paid, a bot can do it. A bot can do it.
And that is such a sensible approach. And actually, joking aside, that's exactly how the industry should be looking at it. Because if you understand the basic rights that we have, a lot of it's to do with, okay, it's a property right. And like any other property right, if people use that right, then it's about commercial terms. And as you know, I work with equity, and I've been warning them about this for years. But people like Bruce Willis would license his face, which he did to a Russian telecom firm. So even when he stopped acting, David Bowie, who was always revolutionary, he basically put provisions that his likeness and music and everything else shouldn't be licensed for AI, because he wants to make sure you get control of it. And what's going to happen in the future is that you're going to have these digital resurrections of artists where they can continue going forever. So it's understanding what the technology can do and making sure that you put appropriate safeguards in place. And anybody, and the offer is open to anybody, do get in touch at Andrew Eborn. I'm here all the time. We will make sure we fight the fight and make sure people understand that rights really are important.
They really, really are. Especially for artists, I think, and photographers, people like that who put their work out there for us to enjoy, and they have every right to be paid for it. The EU, companies in the EU have sounded the alarm over the draft AI law. Now, this was a law that was being brought in to control AI, and a lot of companies are saying, no, we don't want it controlled. We want to see how far it can go.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? I mean, it was Stephen Hawking who said AI is perhaps the greatest human achievement, but also the biggest existential threat. And I was talking at the AI summit just a couple of weeks ago, where Rishi Sunak was saying that he wants the UK to be at the centre of this for regulation. And basically a dozen of Europe's largest companies, including Siemens and Airbus, have spoken out against the proposed EU regulation, because they're saying the rules could risk harming competitiveness. And I think what you don't want to do, you don't want to shackle the sort of creativity and so on and so forth, but you do need to put some sort of safeguards in place. And the problem with the Act at the moment, it is very wide-reaching. And obviously it doesn't apply in the UK. It will take many, many years to discuss and so on and so forth. But we do need two basic sort of systems, if you like. One is what is about the in, i.e. how does the content get put into these machines. That's scraping the internet using copyright works, as we said, needs to be regulated, and we need to make sure we understand when that happens. And the other is the output, if you like, because you could get all sorts of fake things. We saw the fake Pope dressed in a puffer jacket. The devil may love Prada, but the Pope prefers a puffer, is what they say. But all these fake pictures, we need to know that we're basically drowning in a sea of information, most of which is false. It's going to get so much worse as AI starts taking over, if you like, and putting all this sort of false material out there. So they're looking at ways that you should identify when a work's been done by AI, and so on and so forth. The problem is there are huge fines for those who fail to comply. But the big boys and girls, like the Googles of this world and so on and so forth, they're not really the ones to worry about. It's these bad robots who will be using AI for mischief, if you like. They're the ones who we need to sort of control. And I think that getting them to sign up to any of these things is going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking today at some of the fake news around about the riots, the French riots, and some of the images that are out there are literally taken from films. I mean, they're not real.
Oh, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
People are being fed this poison, and it's not accurate. It's just a lie. It's a downright lie.
And it's, again, understanding how some of these AI systems can actually, not even existing footage, they can create footage. You say, show us a riot scene and put the Eiffel Tower in the background.
Yeah.
And it can create it. So we have to, I always urge people, question everything. And it's always the thing, we rush, don't we? We want rush to be first in the news, that everybody wants to report something. And actually facts come out. And we need to make sure that, I think we live in a very diseased information space.
I couldn't agree with you more. And people only want to see what backs up their own prejudice or their own belief system as well.
Absolutely.
So,
and what happens?
You won't question it. You won't question it. One of the images is of a van with a door open and loads of young men on there with a machine gun. It's from a film. And yet, I question that because I thought, don't think that looks right. But people who want to believe that that's what's happening won't question it. And that's the problem.
And that's exactly the problem, Patrick, because you can now search for, if you want to find an image that basically confirms your prejudices.
Yeah, it confirms your bias.
Exactly. Then that will happen. And if there isn't one, then AI can create one for you. So we're a very, very, very dangerous space at the moment. And we do need to make sure that people do question everything. People need to work out what can actually happen in this space and make sure they take appropriate safeguards.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. Talking of which, authors are now suing OpenAI, claiming mass copyright infringements of novels.
Yes, this is absolutely right. Again, what's happening is, as I say, it's the input. Again, going back to copyright, which is such a fundamental right which everybody has. And what it is, it's a class action, which is filed in San Francisco on Wednesday. And basically they said that it relied on harvesting mass quantities of copyright-protected work without consent, without credit, and without compensation. And what they're seeking is a court order that the company infringed the writer's work when it illegally downloaded copies of novels to train the AI system, because that's what happens. The AI gets trained on copyright works. It can then give summaries and so on and so forth as a result of that training. So we do need to be absolutely aware that commercial, as we touched on beforehand, commercial systems need to be in place, that you ensure that the relevant owners of the property, the intellectual property, get appropriately rewarded. You might remember Getty Images again, where they were sued. They actually were the people suing the AI art generator Stable Diffusion, because in that case they were using all sorts of copyright images in that situation. So again, as I say, two aspects to it. One is what's going into the AI to feed it, and the other is what comes out of it, both of which we need to be very, very careful about.
Yeah, Getty don't like it when people plagiarise their stuff, and yet they do it to other people. Typical.
Well, it's always the way. Copyright works both ways.
Twitter has been sued by music publishers for $250 million.
Yes, it's basically all of this is a wonderful copyright theme going throughout. And a group of 17 music publishers in the US has sued Twitter. And it claims that the platform enables copyright violations involving nearly 1,700 songs. And these are some of the big firms, which are basically their Sony Music and their Universal Music. And what's happening is all these platforms are basically using music. But Elon Musk, we're all musketeers, he's got big plans for Twitter, having spent an absolute fortune, $44 billion to acquire it. And it's becoming more than just words. You can now get videos on and so on and so forth. And it's going to become a bigger and bigger case. But there's precedents for this. The other big platforms like YouTube and so on and so forth, which use copyright works, they have to come to a deal. It's going to cost money. Because they are using copyright works, and it is going to be needed on that sort of basis. But it is interesting what Elon's doing to try and get people to sign up and get new generation for money. And I don't know if you notice on Saturday, various people say that temporary limits were put in place.
Yes, I don't understand this. I mean, how many people scroll through pages and pages and pages and pages of Twitter? Because I don't.
Well, you'll be surprised. I got the block saying, "Hang about, you've seen too much." Because what happens is you scroll through these things very quickly, and you might respond to it and so on and so forth. And it's working on that sort of premise. But basically, what happened is Elon put out a tweet, and it was a bit confusing as to how it all sort of started. But basically, he sort of said that on Saturday, he said that people were limited to reading 6,000 posts a day, unless it was an unverified account, when they could be considered 600.
Yeah, not.
So 600 if you're unverified. In other words, if you haven't paid for your blue tick, you're limited to 600.
Good.
If you have paid for your blue tick, you're limited to 6,000. That then went up in a matter of minutes to 8,800. And then 3 hours later, it was now up to 10,000, which is where he is at the moment. So if you've got a blue tick, you can see 10,000 tweets.
Well, if you're paying, you should be able to see everything, shouldn't you?
And that's exactly the point. He's arguing that what's happening is these AI bots are scouring all the different tweets now to get that information. And he's arguing that basically he's trying to limit that. But at the moment, the way it stands is 10,000, 1,000 if you're unverified, don't have your tick. And if you're new and unverified, you only get 500. It doesn't sound a lot, but as I say, I think I used mine up very quickly in less than an hour. And they said, well, that's more than enough. It probably was, actually.
It's probably better for you. It's good for you not to have to go through all of that tripe. I mean, there's so much. on there that is just vile, and I 600 is or 1,000 is way more than I'll ever need.
I guess if you work on the basis, if you only pick the ones that say nice things, and they only ever say lovely things about you, Petri, and when we come on together, it's such a joy to read them. I might read them more than once and retweet them. It's always fun.
I do get very nice comments. It has to be said. I have got very nice audience.
Richly deserved.
Yeah.
Richly, nobody works harder. It's a joy.
That's a very nice audience. Listen, we haven't got time to go through the rest, but I just very quickly want to hit on the basic legal right to bank accounts, because we're hearing now that people are getting their bank accounts cancelled because they might be a PEP.
Yes, no, absolutely, potentially, basically politically challenging, if you like, on that sort of basis. There's a fundamental right under European law to have a basic bank account. We don't have that in the UK, and you have people like Nigel Farage has had his bank account taken away. There was a vicar who wrote to a particular building society and didn't like their policy on trans and inclusivity, and apparently he was being rude, and so they took his bank account away. It is a big, big issue. We need a fundamental right to have a bank account in this country, because without it, people cannot operate. You cannot have your salary, you can't have credit cards, you have problems with mortgages and so on and so forth. It needs to be looked at. These particular cases with Nigel and others have raised this as an important issue. It
really is an important issue, and like you said, it should be a basic legal right. Thank you, Andrew. Great as usual. Andrew Eborn there, barrister and broadcaster, talking us through some of the big legal stories at the moment. Stay with us. We're going to be talking, well, is it cricket or not?